So I was in my early 20s and a woman when this happened. I moved out on my own for the first time about 2 years ago. I hadn't really interacted much with my neighbors and felt a bit uneasy because it seemed like no one around was keeping an eye on me. If something seemed off, nobody would likely notice or check up on me. Last year, I started noticing a man who walked his dog regularly in the grass area behind my house. This wasn't unusual, as it's a common area for residents. His dog was really cute, and my cat used to enjoy playing with it through the glass back door. They would chase each other back and forth, putting their paws up to the glass. It was pretty cute. Well, one day I was outside, and his dog came bounding up to my porch, clearly happy, looking for pets and wanting to say hi to its feline friend. This was the first time I actually spoke to this neighbor. Let's call him Mark. He seemed all right enough, and we got along fine. We ended up hanging out quite often in a short time because I'm a smoker, and he was always letting his dog out. Plus, it was summer, so we kept running into each other and would chat for an hour or more after work most days. This went on for a couple of weeks. I gave him my phone number and was happy to have a friend in my complex. I should mention that he seemed very keen, either hoping for a romantic relationship or at least some close friendship. He mentioned butt buddies quite a lot, though not literally, you know the type. I was very honest with him, telling him repeatedly that I wasn't interested in either, and had to say this quite often. Honestly, I was getting rather irritated that this topic came up several times every time we spoke. He quickly started trying to get me into his house. From our first conversation until the last, he offered multiple times every time I saw him. I always said no, citing my cautious nature as the reason. He got tired of that excuse and started inviting himself into my home as well, but I always refused. One day, he came out while I was smoking, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, saying, "I had to try this stuff because it's delicious." I instantly noticed the seal was broken. It was a screw cap bottle, and while it didn't seem like any wine was missing, I thought it was a bit odd that it was filled to the very top, as wine usually isn't. He poured a couple of glasses without missing a beat and urged me to drink. I felt very uncomfortable, but didn't want to make a scene or accuse him of anything, figuring he was just being a friendly neighbor. After all, he poured himself a glass of the same wine, right? My mom taught me better than that, though, so I just pretended to take a sip and told him it was good. After just about every sentence either of us said, he'd again tell me to drink, and I'd tell him I don't really drink much, so I'm pacing myself. However, I did mention that I noticed he hadn't taken a drink and asked him to please go ahead. He didn't grab his glass right away, but in the middle of speaking, he reached for it and knocked it over, spilling the wine onto the grass. He brushed it off quickly and said it was my turn to drink now. I pointed out, "But you still haven't had a drink either. You spilled yours. Pour yourself another glass. I don't want to drink alone." So he did, but still didn't take a drink. He did tell me a few moments later to drink mine. I said he needed to catch up, and we basically just kept going around in circles. He reached for his glass again, and guess what? He spilled it again. Wine was all over the grass now. He then told me to take a drink. At this point, I'd had enough. Too many red flags were screaming at me to get out of there. I was honest with him, saying this seemed really sketchy and I didn't trust the drink, especially since he was refusing to drink any himself, but was way too eager for me to drink mine. He claimed he was just clumsy and taking it slow because he doesn't drink much. But I knew he'd seen me having friends over who were drinking beers and wine, so he knew I could handle it better than him. That raised another red flag. He's been watching me, hasn't he? It's important to mention that our complex is huge. He used to work there, knows the maintenance crew, and he doesn't live particularly close to me. He's about half a block away and couldn't see my windows or yard from his place. There were other common yards closer to him where he could walk his dog. So I told him I absolutely wasn't drinking anything because of how everything seemed. He again poured himself a glass, and yet again, he spilled it. There wasn't much wine left in the bottle at this point. I poured the remaining wine into his glass and told him to drink with me on 3. We raised our glasses. To my surprise, he actually took a drink then, and I spilled mine onto the grass. He came out about 2 nights later while I was smoking and immediately started yelling at me, complaining that I wouldn't date him or have sex with him, and wondering why all girls were like this. He got really loud, shouting at me, asking what was wrong with him that I wouldn't do these things. I told him I'd been honest with him since we met, that I wasn't interested in that, and that it wasn't him specifically. I just honestly wasn't interested in that from anyone at the moment. He kept shouting and started complaining about his ex and her dog. Yes, her dog. Then he proceeded to tell me that he used to abuse the hell out of that dog, detailing how he wouldn't give it food or water because it had an accident in the house and how he would kick it really hard. I was horrified at this point, especially since the whole time he was telling me this, he was playing fetch with his own little dog. His dog always seemed scared of him, and I'd even pointed that out before. He'd said his dog's previous owners were abusive, so it was just very scared and distrusting. The dog was always very excited to see me, though. It would cuddle up with me and stay near me, so I'd always thought I was special. But hearing this, I just thought the poor guy was probably in an abusive household himself. I was so done with this guy that I just cut him off and said I needed to go because my friends were waiting. He had sent me several strange messages while he was outside. He would just bombard my phone with things like, "Hey, hi," then random letters strung together to make gibberish, ending with LOL or hi, over and over. He texted me saying he knew I was home because he saw me walking around or that he saw my car in the parking lot. He would throw his dog's toys onto my porch, probably trying to get my attention because of the cute dog. He would just stand outside my porch for hours. It was cold and rainy, snowy those days, making it even creepier. He must have thought, since I'm a smoker, I'd eventually come out. Silly of him, though, because I'd just go out front when I saw him out there. He said several things to me before the wine incident that were red flags. I figured it might be a language or cultural difference, as English is his third language and America his third country. I guess the main point of this story is to just trust your gut. But he still bothers me, and like I said, we only really spoke and hung out for a few weeks back in the summer of 2020. My last message from him was last night. He asked what he'd done wrong and if I felt disrespected in any way. I haven't spoken to him since he screamed at me for not sleeping with him, which came after him admitting to that horrible animal abuse. I thought about answering his text with the harsh truth about how twisted and creepy he seemed and how uncomfortable he made me feel, but I didn't want to give him any ideas on how he should change his behavior. Stay smart, everyone. Don't drink things people give you if the seal is broken. He was definitely trying to drug me. And to everyone suggesting I move, I really appreciate the concern for my safety. I'd love to move since I feel uneasy in my own home now, but moving is expensive, and I can't afford it right now. Story 2, paraphrased. I'm from Scotland, and my workmates took a trip to Newcastle for a friend's hen party. A hen party is the Scottish term for a bachelorette party. We visited a few pubs and clubs that night and eventually settled at LL Nightclub. I have autism, so generally my social skills aren't great, but they insisted I come along, saying it would help my confidence. What happened that night, though, felt like it would ruin me forever. Unlike others, I process sounds and noises quite differently. My friends were dancing to the loud music, finding it fun, but for me, it was just intense white noise, like an extremely high-pitched tone ringing in my ears. I really regretted going out. I mostly just sat there while they danced. I saw a guy from a distance hanging off a balcony. Thankfully, some bouncers caught him when he fell. I felt relieved, but also disgusted that someone could put themselves in such a state. He was removed from the club. My anxiety had shot through the roof, and the music was just too much. I told my friends I felt ill and wanted to head back to the hotel, so they told me to stay safe and call a taxi, which I did. I waited outside for over an hour in heavy rain. No taxi arrived. I called back numerous times, but they said the service was busy and it would be a while before one could get to me. The doorman showed me where the taxi rank was and said I'd get one faster if I walked there instead of waiting. I walked down there, following his directions. It was very dark, rainy, and eerily quiet. Then he emerged from an alleyway. It was the same guy from the balcony. He was urinating in the alley. He looked like a typical English hooligan, shaved head, topless, awful ripped denim, and holding a beer bottle. I kept walking towards the taxi rank, and I could just feel him following me. "Oi," he said. "Oi, you." I don't know why, but I turned around. I told him the time, lowered my head, and kept walking. He tried to catch up, stumbling a bit because he was clearly drunk. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Hey, I'm talking to you." "I'm Scottish," I replied. He started rambling, but I ignored him. "Oh, listen, I'm talking to you," he insisted. He reached his hand out to grab my shoulder, but nearly tripped. I couldn't help but laugh a little. "What the hell are you laughing at?" he demanded. "You Scottish jerk," he spat, reaching for me again. Instinctively, I started to run. I didn't feel comfortable with him there. He began chasing me. "Oi, get back here. You fuck," he kept shouting. My high heels had come off during the run, and I was barefoot. I couldn't run anymore. I was out of breath, and my feet hurt terribly. I ran into a phone box to try and hide from him, and he tried to force the door open. I held it shut as hard as I could, using all my weight. He started ranting at me through the door. "You skank! Wait till I get you. I'm going to teach you a lesson." He started kicking the door, and it almost gave way. I was screaming for help, but some people passing by ignored my cries. He kept kicking, and he almost got in. I jammed my fingers in the crack, but still managed to hold it. Then, I used my feet to push back even tighter. He threw his glass bottle at the door, and drink spilled everywhere, soaking the phone box. I was worried the glass might break. He would have definitely gotten me then. He started ranting again, calling me Scottish and throwing all sorts of profanities at me, making stereotypes about Scottish people. I couldn't stop crying and kept screaming for him to leave me alone. I could actually feel my throat getting sore from screaming so much. Then, he pulled out his penis and started rubbing it against the glass, saying, "I'm going to make you suck this, you dirty slut." After another struggle, he managed to get his hand inside and grab me, but I kicked the door shut hard against his arm, jamming his fingers. When I kicked it again, he was writhing in pain, and blood was pouring out. Some passers-by finally tried to scare him off. He pulled out a penknife from his pocket and threatened them with it. He got into a fight with two guys who came to help. I took the chance to run away while his back was turned. I remember my bare feet ended up covered in glass, but I was so shocked, I just kept running. The rain didn't stop. I spent the next hour at the taxi rank in a freezing cold, and on top of everything, I'd lost my jacket during the run. I don't remember how it happened, but I was bleeding heavily from my feet. I could see the blood mixing with the raindrops on the concrete. The taxi driver asked if I was okay. I was constantly shivering with fear and cold, unable to stop crying. I could barely talk, but I managed to tell him what happened. I barely made it to the hotel room after that. I went to the hospital afterward and got 4 stitches in my feet and antibiotics to prevent infection. I went back to Scotland the next night by myself. I was too scared to do anything else. I reported him to the police, but nothing came of it. I never heard back. Story 3, paraphrased. I was on a plane once when I noticed that even though people were still boarding, there were plenty of empty seats around me. The last group to board was a large family traveling together. There were 4 adults and about 10 children, ranging from toddlers to high school age or young adults. They looked like a typical big group traveling with kids. Some were shy, others were running around, and the adults looked frazzled, trying to keep everything together. After they were all seated, there seemed to be an issue with their seating arrangement. One member of their party was supposed to be sitting several rows back. The flight attendant apologized and explained that sometimes the computer shuffles sequential seating, but assured them that everyone would have a seat. The family sat down without that one person and started talking about how unfortunate it was, wishing they could all sit together. Since it seemed their group was now around me, I stopped the flight attendant and asked if I could switch seats with someone in their party. This drew the attention of the large group, perhaps expecting a complaint. The flight attendant told me no, that they don't usually do seat swaps once everyone is seated, and asked if there was a problem with my current seat. I explained that I was traveling alone and didn't mind where I sat, and asked if I could perhaps give up my seat to the family member who was missing, as my seat would place them right in the middle of their group. The family overheard me, and people started thanking me as I reached overhead for my bag. and followed the flight attendant to the family member's seat. The flight attendant explained the situation, and I noticed the family member, a young girl, maybe 12 years old, seemed eager to get back to her family and thanked me multiple times. She practically ran back to her family before I could even sit down. The man who had been sitting in her seat was literally staring, mouth agape, and asked, "What's the problem?" No, that girl was sitting here first. Red flag number 1. The flight attendant explained what was happening. The man immediately looked at me and said, "No, I don't want to sit next to him. Where's that girl going?" She explained to him that there was no issue now and nothing she could do about it. I think she was getting the same bad feeling I was. My main point is that I don't like judging people based on how they look, but this guy was the definition of red flags. He was overweight and seemed puffy, that sort of overweight without muscle tone look. He was half bald with a few strands combed over the top. He wore thick glasses and had no chin. He was a mouth breather, constantly keeping his mouth open, drooling a bit, then sucking it back in between heavy breaths. If there was a textbook example of a creep, it would be him. If there was a textbook example of a creep, it would be him. As I was putting my bag overhead, he started muttering to himself under his breath about how this was bullshit and just his luck and that he wasn't bothering anybody. And even why did they move that girl? I wanted to say something, but I didn't. It wasn't long before my seat neighbor got a phone call. They were talking about an upcoming court appearance and mentioned something about no victim's testimony rarely showing up, and people wouldn't ask them to babysit if they were like that. The only time I really spoke to him was when he started watching porn quite openly on his laptop, even with earphones in, while grunting, sweating, and wheezing, and he kept muttering, "little bitch," whenever a scene he liked came on. Then he took a blanket and covered his lap, fidgeting with his hands underneath. The moment I saw he intended to keep them there, I pretended to reach for the call button. He then jerked his hands out from under the blanket and started muttering under his breath about me minding my own business. At some point, I got up to use the restroom. When I came back, he was on the phone again. I overheard something about the ass on her. Then, "No, they switched seats on me. Got away, ha ha ha." He shut up when he saw me approaching. Eventually, the creep fell asleep, thankfully staying asleep for the rest of the flight. As we were all deplaning, a woman I assumed was the mother's age was standing with the girl, and she said, "Thank you again." I shuddered to think how he might have acted towards her had she remained seated next to him for longer. He was taken away at the gate by security and police. As he was being led off, he said, "This isn't my laptop." By the way, he was met by security and police at the gate. Story 4, paraphrased. So yesterday, the scariest thing that's ever happened to occurred at my local Walmart. It was Black Friday, and there was a printer on sale that my fiance and I really wanted. He also wanted to pick up some other Christmas gifts that were on sale. We went into the store together, but then went our separate ways to shop. By the time I got back to the printer section, I figured my fiance should be back soon, so I decided to stay around that general area. I pulled out my phone to text him where I was and pushed my cart right in front of the printer display, blocking the aisle because I knew people were behind me. The guy directly behind me walked past and then turned around to take a picture of the printer display. Naturally, not wanting to be in some random person's photo, I moved out of the way. At this point, I wasn't thinking much of it until he started lingering after taking the picture and didn't seem to be doing anything. He stood there holding his phone out, still in camera mode, looking around aimlessly. I wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his phone still active like that. Aware of my surroundings so as not to get in anyone's way, I was just standing there trying to decide whether to wait there for my fiance or go do some more shopping. I thought to myself, man, this guy seems unsure what to do. Maybe just as confused as I am. But then he turned completely around to look at a box of young men's boxer shorts and took a picture. I could see the camera click, and he acted like he'd taken a photo but clearly hadn't. I found that strange. I figured I'd just get out of there to finish my shopping faster. As I turned to leave the area, I noticed he was starting to move too, waving his phone around. So I turned back around and pretended to be unsure of where I wanted to go or what to do. Just then, he stopped moving and started looking around like he wasn't sure what his next move should be. This is when I started to get suspicious. The whole time, I was staring directly at him, facing his direction, just in case he looked at me. He was only a few feet away now. I knew he must have noticed I was looking his way, and yet he couldn't take the picture. He continued to look confused, and that's when I decided it was time to leave. So I turned the opposite direction and started walking faster. Realizing he was also walking behind me, I stopped and turned to face his direction again. He walked past me, stopping a few feet away. I kept my head turned to watch him, and when he saw me looking, he walked past me again to grab a printer off the shelf. At this point, I was starting to freak out. I decided to call my fiancé loudly and ask where he was and when he'd be back to the printers, not wanting to explicitly say what I thought was happening, as I wasn't sure. I didn't want to sound paranoid, right? Maybe I was. An older lady was trying to come down the aisle, and I was ignoring her, trying to act like I wasn't paying attention to him while asking my fiancé where he was. The guy went to grab a printer, and throughout all this, his iPhone was still in his hand, the camera app still open, and he was waving his phone around. He never once exited the camera screen. As he reached for the printer, he positioned his phone so the camera lens was perfectly aimed at me. If you have an iPhone, you know you can use the volume button to take a picture, and that's exactly where his finger was. He tried to distract me by pointing out the older lady trying to get through. All the while, he was laughing and smiling at the lady, talking about how unbelievable it was that I was just standing there. He walked away with her, and that's when it really hit me. There was no way what just happened was normal. It also struck me that once I started asking my fiancé where he was, the guy seemed to be getting ready to leave. So I followed the lady and apologized to her, explaining I was scared because the man she'd just been talking to was trying to take a picture of me. The lady said the man had been talking to her about me and that she'd mostly ignored him. He'd then gone the other way. That's when it clicked. Maybe I should just ask the guy directly if he'd taken pictures of me. It shouldn't be a big deal if it was a misunderstanding, right? And I wasn't actually in his way at all. Well, he looked at me, shocked and confused, and asked, "What? Huh? What are you talking about?" I said, "Yeah, back by the printers, I thought I saw you taking pictures of me." At the flip of a switch, he completely lost it. He started screaming at me, calling me a crazy bitch, asking what the hell was wrong with me and who do I think I am. He called me names and told me to go suck a dick. He started screaming again, refusing to show me any pictures, yelling that I could call the cops if I didn't believe him. Another customer, whom I'm so thankful for, went to get a manager. So when I told him I was going to call the police, he walked away and disappeared for about 5 minutes. It shouldn't be that hard to show someone your phone, right? If someone approached me wondering or scared that they took a photo, I'd be confused, yes, but then I'd apologize if I had, and I'd have no issue showing them my phone. At this point, I was having a full-blown panic attack in Walmart, literally gasping for air. All this time, I was on the phone with my fiancé, unable to tell him where I was specifically. I could only manage to say something like, "the clothes by the register," which isn't very helpful since all the clothes are near them. When he came back, the guy turned to my fiancé and told him to tell me to shut the hell up and started freaking out again. He was doing all this in front of the manager now. The manager made a call, presumably to security. Security came because he was threatening to hurt us and had his own side of the story heard elsewhere. When the police arrived, they spoke to him, took his side of the story, and then looked through his phone. They also looked through my phone. They informed me they didn't find any pictures of me, either in his gallery or recently deleted files or texts. But we all know he probably deleted any evidence when he ran off as soon as I threatened to call the cops, or could have hidden it in other apps. I'm sorry, but no innocent person reacts in that manner. Like, I didn't even approach him accusing him of definitely taking a picture of me. I just asked if he had taken any pictures of me. I just explained what I thought I'd seen. But I was just explaining what I thought I'd seen. The police informed me he would be charged with disorderly conduct. I'm not sure if that means he was arrested or just given a citation, as I had no idea where he was after the officer left me. I'm sure some people will think I'm overreacting or something, but anyone who knows me knows that in situations like this, I usually ignore the person and pay them no mind. Like the other day, some dirty old man was saying really perverted things to me as I was bent over doing something with my car's floor mat, and I just ignored him and left. I'm not one to usually get worked up over this stuff, and I'm sure we've all felt like someone was following us and never said anything. If I notice someone around me a lot in a store while I'm alone, I do, of course, stay aware. As a woman, I have to pay attention to these smaller things happening around me. I'm confident that the man never intended to buy a printer, and now that he had one in his cart and I confronted him, he couldn't just go and put it back. So, he'll probably end up returning it to the store, or maybe his girlfriend will. It's been over 24 hours later, and I'm still having panic attacks where it feels like I can't breathe. I shake, and my chest feels like it's sinking in. This is honestly the scariest thing that has ever happened to me in terms of personal safety. And that right there should tell you how odd the situation felt to me. I just don't know what to do. I have an 11-month-old daughter, and every single cry or scream she makes now triggers me and makes me feel even more anxious. I feel like the people around me don't understand why this has had such a huge emotional impact on me. I mean, I don't fully understand it myself since I'm technically okay, but knowing how close I came to something really bad is terrifying. And how am I supposed to act like that wasn't traumatic? I'm so scared that this man might have had a picture of me somewhere. It's not hard to hide a picture on a phone by using different apps, fake apps, or messaging apps, etc. I'm scared for my life that whenever I go out in public, I might run into him or someone he potentially showed the pictures to, and either he will kidnap me or somehow hurt me. I live in an area with a high rate of human trafficking, and this is something that has been happening to multiple women around here at that same Walmart. A lot of people have caught it on video, but I just couldn't. I know it just happened, but I'm so scared this feeling will never go away while I still live in this area. Story 5, paraphrased. So this happened a couple of days ago. I live in the suburbs of Northern California in an upper middle-class neighborhood. My parents were away for their anniversary, so I had the house to myself for the week. I got home from a late shift at work around 1 a.m. I went inside, took a shower, and then headed to the kitchen to make some buffalo wings for dinner. I opened a beer and sat down in front of the TV, scrolling through movies on HBO. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It startled me so much I actually jumped off the couch, knocking my beer over in the process. It was 2 a.m., and there was absolutely no reason for anyone to be at my door at that hour. I just stared towards the front door for several seconds before it rang again, this time followed by rapid knocking on the door and window. Now, instead of being scared, I felt more annoyed that some idiot would think it's okay to bang on someone's front door at this time of night. I walked over to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled the door open, but kept the chain in place. I didn't think to look through the peephole first. Standing on my front porch was a woman, probably in her mid-20s, with long, silky black hair, wearing a purple hoodie and black pants. I asked, "Can I help you?" She replied, "Yeah, sorry to bother you so late, but my boyfriend and I are having car trouble, and our phones are dead. We were wondering if you could possibly let us use yours." She pointed up the street to a dark sedan parked under the street lamp and said, "See? That's us right there." She explained her boyfriend had walked to the gas station to see if anyone there had a phone. I pulled out my iPhone and told her to make it quick since I was about to go to bed. She thanked me and said she'd only need a couple of seconds. She took my phone and dialed a number, putting it to her ear. After a few rings, someone picked up and she said, "Yeah, it's me. I'm borrowing someone's phone." She paused and I could barely make out a man's voice on the other end. At this point, I started to feel uneasy. She was taking much longer than a couple of seconds, and I grew impatient. Throughout the call, she just stood there staring at me with wide eyes and a smile that looked forced. While the person on the line kept talking, she finally said, "Okay, bye," and handed me my phone back. Then, she asked if she could come inside to use my bathroom. I said no and wished her luck before shutting the door. Just as I was about to turn away, I heard her laugh and say, "You made the right choice." I looked through the peephole, and she was still on my porch, but now a man stood next to her. He looked to be around her age and was wearing a hoodie and a face mask. The pair then started circling my house, banging on the windows and laughing. I didn't hesitate to call 911 at that point. They stuck around for several minutes trying to get through my back door. I had my Glock 19 in hand, aimed at the back door, with 911 on speakerphone, ready to do whatever necessary if they got inside. They banged on my back door for about 5 minutes before finally leaving. I watched them run up the street to that same black sedan and drive off. The police arrived a few minutes later and took a report. They told me I was the third person that night to call about that same suspicious couple attempting to enter homes. I don't know what they had planned, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't anything good. The moral of the story is never answer the front door at 2 a.m. again, especially without checking who's there first. I learned my lesson that night.